Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Isai. I'm very excited to share with everyone that the weather outside here in Yerushalayim or HaKodesh is absolutely beautiful, as it has been for the last 24 hours. The reason why I'm telling you about the weather, because last week when I was teaching, it was pouring with rain, as it has been for literally 2 weeks in a row. Apparently, we have not seen this in 30 years, 2 weeks of rain in a row. And the last time I remember insane weather like this was during the Gulf War. And for me personally, there's no question in my mind that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as he always does here in Eretz Yisrael, is talking to us through the weather and saying, with all the insane Hester Panim that we're going through at the moment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is reminding us with a big smile that he is in fact extremely, extremely close. And what is happening here in Eretz Yisrael, we should look at very carefully and understand what's happening, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking to us through the events of the world at the moment. And with all the tragedy and all the pain, there's also a side that is also very exciting, as in Mitzvah Hashem we shall explain. Last week and the week beforehand was my regular online Chabura. We're learning Hilchos Shabbos together. We're learning the sugyas in Lomdus in the Lamed Tes Malachos. We're talking about Melechet Zerah. And I mentioned that something extraordinary has happened on October the 7th. And I began by showing the difference between the month of Shvat and the month of Av. Now, I just realized that I am talking to you in the month of Adar, and you're actually listening, if I'm not mistaken, in the month of Shvat. Okay, it just works out a little bit interesting over here. But the point I want to make is,
I think he's in Israel.
Yeah, I'm in Israel. I'm definitely in Eretz Yisrael. This is definitely Eretz Yisrael. And when I finish the shir, I'm running off to Daven Shacharis, there's Hashem Yisbarach, with Rosh Chodesh. And yes, today was my father's yahrzeit, the 29th of Shvat, the last day of the month of Shvat. This shir should be Le'il Nishmasei, Shabsai ben Chaim Menachem. And what I said last week and the week beforehand was the following. There are 2 months in the Jewish calendar. There's Av and there's the month of Shvat. And both of them are identified in Jewish thought with the word Yisurim, Yisurim is normally translated as suffering. And I made the following comment. I just want to go over it again. And that is that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, at the very beginning of Shas, I think this could be one of his first statements, if not its first, and Daf Hey, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave 3 huge gifts to the Jewish people, 3 massive gifts to the Jewish people, Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. And Reb Tzadok HaKohen says, we always read about this in the month of Shvat, these beautiful, beautiful gifts. Torah is what we got at Har Sinai. Eretz Yisrael is what everything was muchuvan. If we would not have sinned with the Chet of Egel, everything would have gone straight to Eretz Yisrael. And Olam Haba, says Reb Tzadok, we got in Parshas B'Shalach when we went to Mara and we got Shabbos Kodesh. The Shabbos Kodesh is Me'ein Olam Haba. So we left Egypt for Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. Says Reb Tzadok, all these 3 things are compared to fruit. They're compared to fruit because Torah is the Eitz Chaim, Eretz Yisrael is the Shiva Minim, and Olam Haba is the place of the Garden of Eden, of the Gan Eden. And then he adds the following. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says, V'lei nitnan ela al yedei Yisurim. These 3 gifts come with Yisurim. Yisurim is something that we call suffering, something that has instant negative connotations. And I mentioned that there's 2 types of Yisurim. One belongs to the month of Av, and the other belongs to the month of Shvat. Both are Yisurim, but the Yisurim of Av is what I call tragedies. The Yisurim of Av is outside human comprehension, is something that we can just look at afar, and we have to go deep into our emunah to keep us going through the month of Av, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the big plan. And the other kind of Yisurim is the Yisurim that we want, the Yisurim that we wish for our children, the Yisurim of the month of Shvat is what I call meaningful challenges. And this, Ramesh Shapiro, quoting Rabbeinu Yonah, said, is the essential life of a Torah Jew, is Yisurim, both for the man and for the woman. We live a life that is filled with Yisurim. As I just mentioned, it's still dark outside. I got up to teach Torah. Afterwards, I have to run to Shacharis, and I have to afterwards help my good Rebbetzin prepare for Shabbos. The life of a Jew is never ending. It is constant, pushing ourselves. Because Baruch Hu can give us all the brachos in the world. Ach tov v'chesed yudafuni kol yemei chayai. Because Baruch Hu can drown us in chesed, but it's still on our side, Yisurim, raising that big family, involved in all the chesed projects, taking care of all the world's problems. I'm looking at my good friend, Rav Mike Ravinsky, who, are you in Kansas City at the moment? So that's it. You're always doing brisim and doing things, and you're always on the road, because the job of a Jew is to be like a fruit, is to push yourself. The long trunk that is the symbol of Yisurim, at the end, the sweetness of the fruit, the tamar, as we said, tamar, the bitterness comes to the end with that beautiful dvash at the end. So that was our last two shiurim. We mentioned this idea that the month of Shvat is the Yisurim that is muvukash, and the month of Av is this black hole called tragedy. I also mentioned, and this is also very fitting to this time of the year in terms of Kriyas HaTorah, I also mentioned that the month of Av is tragedy, but what we do know as a rule, that whenever we have tragedy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always fast-tracking the Geula. This is the golden rule, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes 400 years and he crams it into 210 years. That comes with tragedies. Why? We do not know yet. We do not know yet. But whenever there's a tragedy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is fast-tracking the Geula. I have no idea what happened between 1939 to 1945, but I do know with an Emunah Shalema that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did something that saved us from dragging out the Galus over maybe centuries, that he managed to put into those 6 years. Why he did it, how he did it, what's the true story behind the scenes, no idea whatsoever, not even a theory I have. But this is the tradition that we have from Mitzrayim, that Mitzrayim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was fast-tracking the Geula, and that's why it was so hard at the end. There was so many terrible things, as Midrashim bring down. The Nazis would have been proud of the Mitzrayim, what they came up towards the end, and all of this brought us to the Geula Shalema of Mitzrayim in a what's called a chipazon. It all happened very quickly, and we were zeicha to have absolutely everything. Not only absolutely everything, as Chazal say on the 7th day of Pesach, it says that Klal Yisrael finally understood why they had to go through the tragedies of the month of Av. All their questions were answered at the Yom, and any spekus that could go into the future was answered at Har Sinai. What I said last week and 2 weeks ago is the following. I said, how crazy is it that Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba, these three totally different types of Yisurim, the Yisurim of Eretz Yisrael, the Yisurim of Olam Haba, which is the Yisurim of Shabbos Chodesh, and then the Yisurim of Torah, all the three of them came together on what people call October 7th. Meaning on October 7th, we had this extraordinary event that is unprecedented in recent memory of tragedy. And that tragedy happened on Simchas Torah. It happened in Eretz Yisrael, and it happened on the Heilige Shabbos, Shabbos Chodesh. This fusion of these three things comes with an inbuilt nechama that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is fast tracking the Geula. This is my opening statement, quoting myself from the last few weeks, and I'm unabashedly plugging that if you read last week's Mishpacha, so you see I actually summarized it in Family First, this idea in short. Why am I telling you this? Because I wanted to share with you that from the moment the war began until this day, and I'm still hoping to be completely and totally correct in my original assumption, I was waiting for an avalanche of teshuvah that would happen. And at the beginning, there was so many promising signs. There was so many incredible stories that were coming out, and they still are coming out as we speak from our soldiers, the heroes that are on the front line fighting for us, that they're seeing Nisim v'Niflos. I honestly believe that just like the Satmar Rebbe said after the Holocaust, you can get a bracha from anyone with the numbers on his forehead. Today, go to any of these soldiers, ask them about the Nisim and the Niflos they saw with their eyes and the Hisayros that they have gone through, and then ask them for a bracha, because it's just incredible the Hisayros that they have had and their families have had, and people are taking upon themselves in the South. So many people are taking upon themselves keeping Shabbos and so on and so forth. Now, I also spoke to our wonderful NCSY leader, Reb Micha Greenland. When I saw him at Yarchikala, I said to him the following statement, and I really meant it, and I'm still hoping that I'm correct. I said to him, please do not take this as an offense, but what Hamas Yimach Shemam did in one day on Simchas Torah in Eretz Yisrael on Shabbos, what Hamas did in one day, they achieved for the Jewish nation in terms of teshuvah more than NCSY can do in 10 years. And he said I was right. At that time then, because a few months ago, right, this whole Hisayros was in its full power. He managed to achieve in one day what the Gemara in Megillah. So now it's already Rosh Chodesh Adar for me, and Mishenichnas Adar Marbin Besimcha, Mishenichnas Adar Marbin Belimud, the story of the Megillah. And there we have, I wrote out the complete quote, Megillah Yud Daled Amud Aleph. Quote, he says, Gedola Hasaras Hatabas, removing the ring from Achashverosh's finger by Achashverosh to give to Haman, was greater, more powerful. Me'arbarim v'shmeina neviim, 48 neviim, v'sheva nevios shenisnabu lehem l'Yisrael. So here you have Shekulam le'chzirin l'mutav, all the prophecies of Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yecheskel, all the Treasa, all the Nevi'im, and all the Nevi'is, everything they said, all the Hisayros they gave us, could not compare to what Haman managed to achieve in a 20-second transaction between one finger and the other finger. Vila Aseres HaTabas, Hechzirin L'mutav. Klal Yisrael went into teshuvah. And I was hoping this is exactly what we were seeing with this extraordinary event that happened October 7th, that was Gedola Hasaras HaTabas. And we could talk about it in this beautiful month, 2 months, we're getting a double month of Adar, that this will be 2 months filled of teshuvah, filled with Klal Yisrael coming back to their roots, filled with what's called, in the words of my Rebbe Revolba, after the Yom Kippur War, Ruach Mimaraim, right? Something, the heavens opened up and smiled at us, so that Klal Yisrael should live the lives that we're supposed to live. Now, I'm really, really hoping that I am correct. And I'm really, really hoping that what I'm about to say now is 100% wrong. But I do want to share with you a dark thought. And then immediately afterwards, I want to fix it and give it a proper Torah hashkafa. So after the dark thought, I'm asking no one should run away. Okay, you have to let me explain myself. Let me bring it out. The Heilige Klausenberger Rebbe, who I'm going to quote to you in a moment in greater detail, after the Holocaust, he said, obviously in a more mechubadik way that I'm going to say, he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he has the right to say it, because he lost everything. He lost absolutely everything. He had a huge family, and he went through all the 7 levels of Gehenna. And as his Talmud said over, Rav Asher Weiss's father, the only time he cried was at the end when he saw the American troops. And he was so convinced that the war was going to end with the Bias HaGoyel and not American troops. And then that was the only moment that he went through. It was shattered when he saw that it was not the final Geula. But what happened after the Holocaust was not his Iris B'tshuva. Anyone knows the 1950s in America was a disaster for Orthodoxy. And then it took a long time to rebuild. And he accused the Eibishter, the Beshefa, the Heilige Creator, of, in a sense, failing. If you thought that 6 years of Hitler is somebody that Haman would be very proud of. If they're not the same neshama, right? It's the same. They're the same people as far as we're concerned. And Hitler did not bring us to La Yehudim Ha'Soira, the Simcha, the Sasan, the Akar. Never happened. Never happened. He brought a huge systematic change that now Torah is in Eretz Yisrael and Torah is in America, and Europe came to a close. He did bring to an end, and he so to speak ushered in what we call today Galus Yishmael. Right? Since then, our enemy has been Yishmael. That he did achieve. But in terms of the Jewish people in mass doing teshuvah, never happens. We, the people that I'm talking to right now, we are the minority of Torah Yidden that live a life of Einoid Milvadoi. All our brothers and sisters who are davening for that they should do teshuvah, we're still waiting. So this could be a moment of frustration. If it didn't happen by the Holocaust, maybe it's not happening now. And maybe, and for sure, unfortunately, it seems like there's no tshuva coming from the Israeli leadership. They're not saying, they're not saying, when they say Be'ez Hashem, they're not saying it with kavana that, I don't want to say any kitruk. I do not want to say any kitruk, but there's no feeling that they're saying to everybody, this is all about the partnership between our Holocaust soldiers and the partnership between the yeshivas and the Torah Magna Matzla, and that every bullet has an address, and they're not talking about the nisim and the flaws that are coming out of Gaza every single day. And I'm still waiting for what happened in Reb Michal sent 1973. 1973, after the Yom Kippur War, there was a tshuva movement. And you know what? I'm still waiting, because it's very, very hard to be sitting here in my armchair here in Har Nof and to be able to critique what's happening over. It's just been a few months now, and we're inside. We don't know exactly how this is going to bear out. This time next week, you and I could be looking at each other and saying that everything I said now was irrelevant. That's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu seems to be running history. Hayina kacholim, like the end of a dream. Everything's going quick, 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 quick. All I want to do is share with you an idea from my Rebbe, Rav Moshe Shapiro. I want to share with you an idea from him that I think will give us a lot of chizuk, a lot of deeper understanding about what is happening now. And he was coming to answer this question: why is it that sometimes it looks like that, as we like to say, if we were God, we would run things completely differently. When we look at what he's doing, we're saying, like Rav Hutner used to say, "Ruber the Avish to fit the vel." Like overall, it seems like he's doing a good job. He was saying it tongue in cheek, because we see things. We're saying, no, if Hashem would just listen to me and listen to my chavrusa, right, whatever it is what we're discussing, then we could fix all the problems of the world. And sometimes we just see extreme hester panim, and we see that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing, in a sense, the opposite of what we'd like him to do. So Reb Moshe used the Maral of Prague, an incredible idea, to explain something that unfortunately is missing very often from our hashkafic outlook, that we just miss this huge, big idea of understanding periods of history like we're going through now. And I want to give it over to you and explain it and try and imagine what he could have said if he would be around right now. So I want to begin at the beginning. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs his world in two different systems. The system that you and I like to understand because it's instantly relatable is called what's called Hanhagas HaMishpat in the language of the Ramchal. Mishpat means the way a king runs his realm. There's schar, there's onesh. We see that the good guys, in the end, live happily ever after, and the bad guys meet their demise. It's the way it should be, like a good James Bond movie, right? Just when you thought everything was wrong, and in the end, everything works out beautifully, and everyone walks into the sunset, living happily ever after. So this is what's called mishpat. Mishpat means that there's a judgment, and we see the mahalach, and we see how things are going. HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows us a little bit to be a partnership in what he's doing. But there's another Hanhaga, and this is something that is crucial to understand when we talk about the parshas of Sefer Shmos, called Galus and Geula. As you know, Sefer Shmos, which is always read during the month of Shvat and the month of Adar, which is what I want to get to. This Shvat going into Adar is always Sefer Shmos. Sefer Shmos is called by the Ramban Sefer HaGeula. The very famous, the Ramban, that you should read the introduction to the Ramban on Sefer Shmos, Sefer Geula. Sefer Geula means that Parshas Shmos and Parshas Ve'era is the seeds of the Geula, because that is the Galus in its power. And then Ve'era begins slowly, the Makos Bo, and then B'Shalach is Kriyas Yamsuf, and then you have Har Sinai in Parshas Yisro, and then Mishpatim is, we now have the focus of how to bring the final Geula, and then it ends with the Mishkan, which is the Beis HaMikdash, and the Geula Shalema, and when you finally have, as the Ramban says, the completion of the Mishkan Oz, then and only then are we nechshav properly, the Geula is complete with the building of the third Beis HaMikdash Meher V'Yameinu, and that is why Sefer Shmos is, as a Sefer, the microcosm of the Geula in its full process as it unbears itself. So Ramesha pointed out the following thing, and this is all from the writings of the Maharal. I'm going to read it to you. It begins with a medrash that you and I learned as children. Every single one of us knows this medrash, and if you don't remember it, so ask your children. And I'm looking around, if any of you could be asking, like me, my grandchildren, that they all know this medrash. Let me begin to you. It's the medrash Bereshis Rabbah in Bereshis Parsha Hey, Amar Rab Simon, B'shah Shebara Kodesh Baruch Hu, Livrois Adam Rishon. At that time, when he wanted to create Adam Rishon, he created Adam and Chava, the first human. Nasa Malachi Asharis Kitim. So he created this whole system where the Torah says, let us make man. He involved the other forces of creation into the decision-making process of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to create man. And then his angels broke down into 4 camps corresponding to 4 forces in human nature: Chesed, Emes, Tzedek, and Shalom. The Malachim became these 4, so to speak, forces in human nature. Chesed Ama Yibare Shugeimel Chasadim. So, at least with us Yidden, we can say anything you want. It was one of the things that always amazed me during that period of my life when I worked with Birthright with totally secular Jews. So these secular Jews were, some of them, they called themselves Jatheists, Jewish atheists, and I was always mispal how every single one of these young boys and girls, they were all obsessed with chesed, tikkun olam. So I don't know what they were into, save the whale, right? Whatever it is, save the trees. And today you have those that say, save the minorities. Doesn't make a difference. A Jew is always involved in chesed, and we are. Doesn't make it. I know the whole world, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, sees us as the bad guys, but we are in a whole different league when it comes to chesed. And for that alone, even our secular brothers and sisters. So we are people of chesed, and that should be olam chesed yibane, a reason to create the world. Emes says, Al Yibare Shu Kulei Shkarim. We are completely and totally sheker. We're going to go back to this. But the Maral says the word Kulei Sheker means something that Goebbels understood very well. Yamach Shemot, if you're 99% Emes and 1% sheker, it's still Kulei Sheker. It's the way it goes. Okay, if you're 90, this is the genius of evil to notice this. So the Maral says that ultimately, if you're not MS, if you just you twist a little bit, with that twisting, you twist everything. So we're sheker. So it's not worth building us. Comes along Tzedek and says, no, Yibare Shaisit Stakis. What about all the tzedakah that we're going to do? Comes along Shalom and says, no, don't do this, because mankind is filled with machlekes and filled with arguments. So you have 2 against 2. You have chesed and tzedakah versus shalom and emes. So we now have what's called an impasse. In a soccer game, you need a penalty shootout. That's what would happen here. But that's not what's going to happen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does something seemingly violent. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, it's 2 against 2. We're going to do something violent. Ma'asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu natal emes v'shliach la'aretz. He took emes and boom, he threw it down into the ground. Then he brings down the pasuk in Daniel, Perak Ches, pasuk Yud Beis, v'tishlach emes arza. He took emes and he threw it into the ground. And at this point now is where our little grandchildren or our children or ourselves when we were young, this is where the Medrash ends. And we have this little cute thing that it landed in the ground. And the Hasidim say that it landed in Kotsk. I even think that they have some kind of a gematria, that Kotsk is gematria emes. But the point is that emes was thrown into the ground. Great. Story ends with violence. And you have now 2 against 1 because it's now inside the ground. And that's it. That's how the story ends. And Baruch Hashem, we're here to tell the tale. The Maral says, how sad is it that that's all our knowledge ends over here? It's because it's ridiculous. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to be involved in so much violence? What does it mean he's throwing this on the ground? Why can't he just gently remove emes? What's this whole vision of him throwing this into the ground? So the Medrash goes on and says, the angels complained to God and said, Hashem, he says, why did you take and throw down your beautiful, beautiful midah of emes? Lama ata mashlich tachzich shelcha mevazeh tachzich. Tachzich literally means a tiara, but here it means, the Mefarshim say it's a reference to what's called that the signet ring of God is emes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's signet ring is truth. So what makes Hashem beautiful is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is kulei emes. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes along and takes his tiara, his beautiful crown, and that's called emes, and throws it on the ground, it's a bizayon to emes. Amalem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is the part that we're getting to. This is, the Maral says, is the key to unlocking not just the Medrash, but understanding everything that Klal Yisrael is going through right now. Amalem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, tale emes min haaretz. Let emes come out of the ground. Dichsiv emes mi'aretz titzmach. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, Perek Kaf Hey, pasuk Yud Beis, that says emes mi'aretz titzmach. Emes will come out of the ground like a seed. Melech meimis umachaya umatzmiach Yeshua. Right, will come out like a tzemach out of the ground. Says the Maharal that this is the key to understanding what Hashem did with emes. Emes was not thrown to the ground. Emes was planted. Emes was planted in the ground. This is the key to understanding absolutely everything, says the Maharal. The Kodesh Baruch Hu has a system with emes, that emes must be planted inside the ground. So now we understand, says Rav Moshe, using this Maharal, Kodesh Baruch Hu has 2 systems how he runs the world. System number 1 is system that goes into our brain because we get it. But system number 2 is something that is ingrained in the essential nature of the teva of the world, of this planet Earth, exactly in the same way as we plant a seed, exactly the same way we have emunah, that is the system of galus and geula, and that is the system of Tchias HaMesim itself. So let's go through this slowly so we make sure that we fully understand what we're saying, that we're fully on the same page. What does it mean to plant a seed? You start off with, let's say, an apple seed. The apple seed is beautiful. I mean, it's not really visually beautiful, but it has nothing wrong with it. When you put it inside the ground, it starts to rot. So this perfectly beautiful seed is starting to rot. If you are a city boy and you see the farmer taking the seed, you'll call him a seed Nazi. What are you doing? What are you doing? What you're doing is that cruelty to take an innocent seed, put it inside the ground. Of course, the farmer understands that there's a process going on. That process is that what happens next is something that no scientist has ever began to comprehend how this works. Nobody, no biologist, nobody has a theory of how a seed rots, and from that rotting seed, there's a moment in time where to the naked eye, we see nothing. And out of that nothingness will explode a eventual apple tree through that whole process that we spoke about earlier of the Yisurim of the tree, the Yisurim of Shva, and then you get apples. And if you plant the seed right, these apples will go on forever and ever and ever. The apple tree is theoretically immortal. So it goes through a rotting process. And in that rotting process is the secret of all the future, is the secret of everything good that is about to happen. So this is a crazy thing to think about, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs his world, specifically through a system called something rotting, and from that rotting itself comes out something that is infinite. That is the nature of Galus. Galus always looks like a rotting seed. It always gets worse and worse and worse and worse until it could not possibly get worse. And at that moment, then the nafachu, okay, everything flips around, as we're about to explain, and out of that comes an explosion of geula, and everything we thought turns out to be the exact opposites. So it comes out, going back to this medrash, if we understand what's happening, it means when is the greatest simon of all that the geula is coming? When do we know for a fact the geula is coming? So the Gemara in Seita brings down in Daf Mem Ches all the siman of Mashiach. V'tiyei emes ne'ederes. Emes is invisible. You cannot see even a drop of truth in the world anywhere. Then that is the moment when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who took emes and threw it into the ground, has achieved his desire, because emes goes in the opposite direction of emes, more sheker and more sheker and more sheker, until boom, there's nothing left. That's the moment that the explosion is about to happen. I want to read to you from the holy words of the Kleisenberger Rebbe. When my father passed away, I took upon myself to every week to learn his Torah. I get it over here in the Shtibelech Imre Shefa, but I also get it online. So it's the most incredible thing how he writes. And here's a perfect example. Pam, once upon a time, Af she'emes lo yametzuya b'kol makom im chipsoi o pishvishu ubidku le'ar haneh k'may b'dikas chametz hayacholin limtzoi ma'at emes. Okay, if you didn't find it in the big chalenis hagvayim, nevertheless you could find a little bit of it, and he brings the pasuk b'chinas v'tishnach emes arza. Or when you go down, you bend down. You don't find it in big numbers, but it's there. In other words, once upon a time, if you use the candle that you use for bedikas chametz, you could find emes in this world. Aval b'doyreinu, he said this 30 years ago. Ha'emes nederes, pirshu she'ena klal b'nimtza. There's nothing is emes at all. Kfi she'emrim al meis rachmanatzan shu neder, or emes nederes. When you say a person is dead, so truth is dead. Truth is dead. Ki be'ikvasa de Mashiach ha'emes meisel legamri v'nekra min ha'olam ad she'ena klal b'metzias. You can't find it anywhere. And if you want to go to find emes, you have to go to the olam ha'emes. Zeh siman habar b'yoseh. Today, says the Heilige Kleisenberger, is the greatest proof that we're getting the greatest proof. He doesn't say a proof. He says it's hasiman habaror b'yoseh shekreivim abam yemais Mashiach, because we now are makayim b'tia emes nederes. The ein lanukim that tzapis Yeshua's Hashem v'labias Mashiach tzidkeinu b'karov. So I want to go and speak this out with you if I can. I want to tell you I mean, you know my personality, that I always like to see the, okay, so Reb Michal, it's exactly where I'm going. You know how my mind thinks. Let's start off with the Goyish world. That's what I wanted to say. I had a little bit of fun, I have to tell you. Well, all my friends were stressing about it. For me, the proof that Akash Baruch Hu may be British, because his humor is so deliciously twisted. I don't want to say this Chas v'shalom about God. Was last month when my good South African friends decided that Israel is a genocidal nation. I cannot begin to tell you how much pleasure this whole thing gave me. I don't know, people were upset about it. There was an embarrassment. But for me, one of these gewaltic things is that you see from the incredible sheka that came out of this whole thing, that it was incredibly laughable. But unfortunately, no one was laughing with us, and no one was laughing with us at all. But for me, it was funny. Let me just tell you I actually looked it up. The murder rate in South Africa, just you should know what's going on over here. In America, it's 6.4. So in case you ever wonder which is more dangerous, America or Eretz Yisrael, so there, 6.4 out of every 100,000 people is going to be murdered. So you're walking down the streets of, for Mayor Strobel, you're walking down the streets of Baltimore, so your chances are 6.4 chance of being murdered, which is actually very real. Just read your papers. In Israel, it's 1.9, okay, which is basically the same as the highest of the most safest places in the world. It's right up there with Singapore and Switzerland. It's 1.9. In South Africa, it's 45, which means that it's off the charts. Okay, I think the only one that came near was Mexico. I don't know. I have so much fun when Mexican parents and South African parents say, "Should we send our kids to Eretz Yisrael? Maybe it's dangerous." Oh my gosh! In South Africa, you come back from the hypermarket, you don't know who's waiting for you inside the car bagage with a knife. You don't know if you're ever going to make it home. In Mexico City, which is not much better, you send your kids in armored cars. It's crazy, the world. The world is crazy. And last year, in a place called Darfur, which is in Sudan, they had an African massacre, which the world did not care. 15,000 people killed in one day. So if you want to find genocide and you want to find murder, there's plenty going around. There's plenty around in that little continent called Africa. Bless their souls. And all those judges with their fancy wigs, they say, maybe there's a Havamina, Eretz Yisrael. I always am amazed because, again, I can't help it. That's just the way I think. If tomorrow the Hamas and all their friends would put down their arms and say, we just want to live a normal life, you know what would happen? We would live a normal life. That's it. It would all be over with. And we could transform Gaza into Monaco or Singapore, whatever you want. If they just got to put their arms down. If the Jews would put their arms down, then we know exactly what's going to happen, because they say it every single day. You can hear it in your local campus, from the river to the sea. Every single Jew would instantly disappear. So we know exactly. Anyone with a teeny weeny bit amongst the Goyim, there's only one fellow called Douglas Murray, and that's it. And he gets it. And everyone else is that, maybe not. Well, it's beautiful that this is happening, because we as Jews have to always see what's going on in this world, that the world is kulei sheker. And Rabbi Michal Ravinsky says the Goyish world is that you can actually read the statistics of what comes out of our politicians' mouths, and sometimes they do say truth, but as we already know from Goebbels, that little bit of truth, whatever it says, oh my gosh, the Republicans are burning books. Okay, so that's it. And then after you find out what kind of books that they're upset with, and then you realize there's stuff I can't even talk about. I can't even talk about what goes on with the woke theology, that they want our children at the age of kindergarten age to already hear about stuff that I, Menachem Nissel, did not know until I moved to Memphis, Tennessee. When I was 30 years old, I found out about these things. They want us to know already in kindergarten. And so therefore, you have what's called this deep sheker where even the Christian world, once upon a time, understood there was a thing called family, and they understood there was a thing called parents and children, and there's a thing called a king and a people, a president and a nation, and all these things were the fabric of a healthy society. So, okay, so Christianity was Western civilization. We have a lot of problems with Esau, but we can at least appreciate the yofi of Yavon and the Shur Sadin that they had overwhelmingly. It's all gone. It's all completely and totally gone. So that's the Olam HaSheker that's out there in the secular world on every single level. But I want to say to Rabbi Ravensky and to those of you that are listening that I don't think this is what we were talking about. I don't think this is what my Rabbi Moshe Shapiro was thinking about, or what the Klausenberger Rebbe was thinking about. I was thinking about the fact that you and I have bought in to a marechet of sheker, so we don't know what is real and what is not real. The perfect example is the medium that I'm using right now. I know for myself, it's Chatayni Maskir Hayayim, that the fact that I can see a few of you are showing me your faces, so it instantly makes my class better. Why? Because psychologically I see people, but when I step back and I think about it, I know it's all an illusion. It's all technology. It's all fake. It's all fake. This whole thing of FaceTiming is the genius of technology, that the brain is sending messages to me. My eyes are sending messages to the brain that I'm seeing people, but it's kulei sheka. What I'm looking at is basically a piece of granite. There's no difference in looking over here. If I could look at the wall behind, it would be the same thing. Everything else is happening in the koach hadimyon that says that I'm talking to people. But that dimyon is basically the world that is kulei sheka. That dimyon that I'm going to be entering in its full power when I drink too much wine on Purim is the same dimyon that tells me right now that FaceTiming is real, and everything about technology is real. The fact that technology is so powerful that it's instant doesn't take away. Let's say there was a 20-minute lag because they hadn't figured out how to make FaceTiming. So in those 20 minutes, and imagine I'm talking to you now and you're seeing me 20 minutes later. In those 20 minutes, the world could change. The world could turn upside down. But the whole thing is that the technology says, no, we're seeing each other. And everything about technology is today that you and I spend hours and hours looking at screens, and we bought into the narrative that this creates the appropriate emotions. So we can watch a movie that our intellect knows it's just a bunch of actors and actresses, and we could see whatever it is, the Fast and Furious driving fast, and our heart rate goes up. And afterwards, when we drive, we find ourselves driving faster. That's what it means that we are living in a world that's kulei sheker, is that the world suddenly that we buy into marechet that's kulei sheker. With that comes the whole advertising industry, where you no longer are buying cigarettes, well, are a band called cancer sticks, but no, you're buying some fancy cowboy in Montana, whatever it may be. I remember when I was in university, I was told by my professor that every single industry in the world will instantly collapse without sheker. That's what he told us. Instantly collapse without sheker. He said, he challenged us. Think of the most boring industry that's out there. Car manufacturing. You want to have a car next year? So the only way to do that is if you employ people in Detroit, right, or in Japan, or in Germany, wherever the car builders are. This car has to come out with new models. The way you build a new model is that you must come out with fictitious needs, so that you come along and buy the latest model. You have an upgrade in something that you don't really need, because the change between your old model and the new model is like the change between the new Apple, whatever it may be, is some kind of thing that you didn't realize that you had this need, and they'll create this need for you, so you can go to shul and say to your friends, hey, I have a 4.2 woofer in my car. And you only have a 4.2, I have a 4.4. And no one knows what a woofer is, but it doesn't make a difference because the advertising people have you. So it's a crazy thing that we buy into everything, everything that we purchase is based on creating imaginary walls, and this spills in to every level of our society, how we make our relationships, how our friendships work. Everything is based on dimion. So the dimion goes deep, deep, deep into our own backyard in the culture that we create, and that's it. And the dimion allows the days and the weeks and the months and the years to go bypass, and we have very little anchoring in the world of reality. This is what I believe is the oimek of what it means by emes nederes, that we're living in a world. It's not just kuli shek in the world of politics. It's not just kuli shek in the world of the American campus or what's coming out of our politicians' mouths, but rather it's kuli sheka that we have bought in, that we don't even see this. So Kadosh Baruch Hu every so often gives us a wake-up call so that we can see with our own eyes how much sheka there is. And thank God, all our brothers and sisters who are in college campuses, a lot of them are realizing to what extent that it's all a facade, all these smiles that people are showing you. I mentioned this when at Yarchikala, we had a young lady from miles north, from Buffalo Grove in Chicago, and she said all her friends after October 7th, not all of them, but a whole bunch of them that were her friends. It's a top high school academically. Suddenly, they renamed her the Jew girl. And where did that come from? These people have no idea. They have no idea from the river to the sea. They have no idea where the river is, where the sea is. But she became the Jew girl. And that's it. She felt the tension when she went to her principal. The principal says to her, nothing I can do about it. It's free speech. They're allowed to call you Jew girl. And she screamed at him that he was an anti-Semite. It doesn't make any difference. The whole world is that way. I knew I was giving the shir today. In the last 12 hours, I checked up the BBC. I wanted to see what's going on in the world. I'm still British. Yeah, I'm still British. I find out, number one, that Iceland, I didn't even know this could exist. Iceland, where is Iceland? That teeny little island has 300,000 people, and 10,000 of them, that's like 3% of the population, signed that if Israel has a representative in Eurovision Song Contest, which is a European song competition, Iceland should pull out. It's a macha about the genocide that we are presently doing in Gaza. Iceland, how do they know to be anti-Semites? And all their Nordic countries that were there for us during World War II, all these countries in World War II were so beautiful. Sweden and Norway, they're all saying, yes, Israel is a genocidal country, and we have to boycott them wherever we can. And the last 24 hours in Ireland, now, I don't know, the luck of the Irish, it's a beautiful country, but the Irish basketball team played the Israeli basketball team, and they refused to shake hands. We don't want to dirty our hands with a genocidal nation. Ireland, who heard of Ireland? This is not normal. It's good for us. It's good for us to see the sheker in our face, and then after look in the mirror and know that the sheker is right there in your own backyard, that you're living a life that's kuli sheker. Everything we do and how we make purchases online is based on sheker, and how the economy works, and how politics works, and how relationships work. Everything is now down to sheker. Let's take this together and say, so now what? This is actually the best news ever. Because let's go back to our rotting seed. What happens when the seed comes to zero? What happens when the seed comes to zero? You open the ground, visually, you see nothing. There's so much going on inside the ground. When you see nothing, there's so much going on the ground. My Rebbe Moshe Shapiro said if we could see a teeny weeny bit more, we would lose our bechira, we'd lose our free choice. If we saw how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu is rushing things, and how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu is planting the seeds and getting ready for the Gula Shlema. Oz yibaka keshacha yirecha, says the prophet Yeshayahu. Then, like a seed, it explodes out. The word yibaka means an explosion of revelation. The word yibaka is the same letters as Yaakov. And this is the key to everything. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu can only bring the Gula Shlema if the world that is filled with sheker has hidden the little granule of emes from which everything can explode from. And this is all we have, is what's called the four walls. that are hidden from this wall. We have to put up walls. The first wall is called the wall of the Beis HaMedrash, which is the last place that maybe a little bit you can find emes. Even today, it's not so simple with what goes on in our yeshivas, but at least the learning of Gemara, we are anchoring ourselves in emes. Then the shuls and our tfilos, the tfilos that we have. So there, when we sit there in front of a Kosh Baruch Hu, and we say Einoi Milvadoi, and we say Kosh Baruch Hu, it's all you, and it's all in your hands, and every bullet has an address, and every bullet that they have against us has an address, and how it's going to end up is completely in your hands. So there you'll find MS, and finally the Jewish homes. Finally the Jewish home. In the Jewish home, if you can cleanse your home and have proper filters on your internet, and you can do your mezuzah is truly, as you enter the house, a wake-up call that your home is a little migdash ma'at. So those three oihalos, the oil of shame, the oil, right, Matayvu Alecha Yaakov, the Jewish home, the Jewish Beis HaMedrash, and the Jewish shul, if those three things we can get right, connected Torah, Eretz Torah, and Gemilas Chasanim, and Avodah, if we can get those things right, then Mashiach has that little kernel from people like us, because that's all that there is on this planet, is people like us, from which that explosion can happen. So, in a way, for us, this is very, very exciting times, because we're now going from the month of Shva, which is the month of planting the seeds, into the month of Adar, which is the month of V'nafachu. What's V'nafachu mean? V'nafachu means that there was a certain moment in time that everything was going down and down and down and down and down. Historically, I actually happened on the 23rd of Sivan, but that's for a different discussion. And then suddenly, overnight, everything changed. And suddenly, Mordechai is on a horse, looking ridiculous because he's wearing Achashverosh's clothing, and Achashverosh was a plus-size monarch. And he's up there, and everyone sees how the biggest, this Haredi ultra-Orthodox fanatic that got us into trouble for the first time, that won't serve in the army and does everything against everything else, that this man was the one that now is on the top of the top. And Haman was the buy. Happened overnight in one go. V'nafachu, laYehudim ha'Yisrael, v'simcha, v'sasan, v'yikar, and suddenly there was an explosion of joy. So what I'm asking every single one of you is to hold on tight, and basically saying to you that we are living in extraordinary times. I've been around for over 60 years, and yeah, I did see it. As Marinsky said, I'm 1973. I do remember 1967. Maybe I don't think I remember it. Maybe I'm imagining I remember it. There were times in my life where we saw these things. The previous generation, they saw these things during the Holocaust, and all of these things, these incredible, incredible turnarounds, is something that we are going to be seeing very, very soon. Everything is in place. Klal Yisrael is back in the land of Eretz Yisrael. How quickly did that happen? Yishmael is the new Galus. How quickly did that happen? In terms of history, happened a tremendous rush. And most of all, as the Kleisenberg said, the world is kulei sheker, both externally and internally, and right down into the medium of FaceTime that I'm using now is kulei sheker. What's left? All that's left is az yibaka k'shach ayarecha. All that's left is for Kadosh Baruch Hu to bring all this tzaras to an end, but in a huge, big overnight revolution, where the emes that was thrown into the ground and allowed to rot explodes with the true emes, and kol haboitchim b'shimcha be'emes will be there to celebrate, like Mordechai in the past, with laYehudim ha'Yisrael v'simcha v'sasim v'yakar kein tiyalanu. Okay, we should be zeiches to see this meher v'yameinu. Thank you very much. Hang on in there, and looking forward to seeing you all in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, with the Geula Shalema, in the world that is Kulei Emes, and all the world can be mistarif with us as we laugh together with the Bias HaGel Meher v'yameinu. Thank you for listening.
Is that, you have time for a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So is there some connection between Bavli finding MS by defining sheker, that's Golus, that this, I mean, there's Shmiya, which is Toshma, versus the Yerushalmi Talchazi.
Yeah. So the one you are correct, like 100% correct. I mean, Galus goes through Shmiya. Well, this is already a total tangent, but
Okay.
in principle, the nature of Torah Shabbal Peh is that from far away it looks like Sheka because it's complete disjointed, and you go deep and deep, and then you find it as Kulei Emes. It's very not Masudar. Art Scroll would be appalled at the way that that Ravina Ravashi wrote the Gemara. The Gemara was written in a world that is completely, totally mubulbal. Like Bavli, they said everything is bilbul.
Right.
That's on the external. In Chapes, you have to go lasik with Divrei Torah. In Galus, you only find the emes if you go in, like we mentioned beforehand.
I mean, the only thing that I'm struggling with is when you said like
Mike, let me go because I want to be able to catch.
Yo, all right, we'll schmooze later. All right, have a good Shabbos.
Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you, Mayor. It's great to see you, Reb Ruvain, and everybody else. All the best.
Shabbos.
Thank you, Ben and Ellie. I think.